Hey all, here are OS Reviews. Today we're taking a closer look at the Smartisan R2. Now, Smartisan's a brand that you have likely never heard of here in the US and in Europe, but they were once a up-and-rising brand. They came out with memorable and beautifully engineered devices, which really reminds me of a grown-up version of an iPhone 4 or 4S, actually one of my favorite gen iPhones in terms of the super boxy corners, glass finish, and the minimalism. This giant logo on the back is actually a fingerprint scanner, and the fact that the secondary camera is in the same size as the camera flash just makes it look really understated. It left a really strong impression as a new brand that put a huge emphasis on strong design. And so it was really unfortunate when I heard the news in 2019 that this brand had become acquired by ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok. Very similar to how Nokia sold their mobile phone division to Microsoft. So a larger corp purchased a phone manufacturer that had a really strong brand identity, and they haven't been doing super well in recent years, so it's unlikely that we'll see newer revisions of phones from this point moving forward. But the Smartisan R2 here was pretty much the last device that this company put out. They were already owned by ByteDance at the time, so unsurprisingly, that app is pre-installed on the phone. But thankfully, that's really the extent of that collaboration. The phone still comes with all the regular Google Play services installed, so you can access the store, download apps, including YouTube, as well as Gmail, Photos, so on and so forth, and still use them very comfortably, unlike, say, Huawei devices in which Google services are banned. And as a result, I would say ByteDance haven't really tampered with the recipe too much and messed it up. So it's just that the smartphone space is so crowded and competitive that growth was really plateauing rather than ByteDance doing something necessarily wrong, I would say. In fact, I would argue that this is one of the most distinctive and personally one of my favorite Android smartphones within the past few years that is just not available here in the West, in US, and Europe. But nonetheless, I wanted to take a closer look here and dive through some of its features. It has a large, nearly bezel-less 6.7-inch Full HD OLED display with this under-display fingerprint scanner, and also a fast 90Hz refresh rate, so it still feels quite smooth and responsive. This phone also comes equipped with the Snapdragon 865 processor. The highest configured model came with up to 16 gigabytes of built-in RAM and up to 512 gigabytes of built-in storage, and also comes with a pretty hefty 4,510 mAh capacity battery, which can be topped up in around just an hour up to 55 watts using the Type-C port. And Smartisan is a brand that also has support for desktop mode, so when you connect it to a monitor, it transforms it into almost a pseudo Chromebook-like experience, or like a Mac or Windows computer, similar to Samsung's DeX mode, so it's very well considered, and we'll take a closer look at that function later on in this video. As a flagship, the phone also is very well constructed with glass on the front and the rear, and on this kind of onyx black finish, it's super stealth-like with this just simple red dot that also acts as a notification light that's subtly decorated with the Smartisan hammer logo. In terms of the camera module, it's a little bit more conventional looking, I would say, but this module consists of a very large primary camera from Samsung. It's an 108 megapixel sensor with a 1/1.33 inch size, so almost 1 inch, and capturing very good results in low light performance as well as having a more natural bokeh as well. This is coupled by a 13 megapixel ultra wide angle lens, 8 megapixel 3x telephoto zoom lens, and a 5 megapixel macro lens for close-up shots as well. And other connectivity options including NFC for contactless mobile payment, as well as GPS, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi are all fully stacked. The only shortcomings would be no Qi wireless charging, and also the 865 being 4G LTE instead of 5G for cellular antennas. A final tour of the hardware. Along the bottom, we have the aforementioned Type-C port. There's also stereo speakers, one on the bottom, earpiece serving as the second unit. This thing does have IP water resistance as well. And then on the left-hand spine, you'll find access to rounded buttons for the volume as well as power key. These are surprisingly tactile despite looking quite small, and retains a similar aesthetic as on their previous gen phone that we saw there. Now located on the other side is an interesting voice recorder button that we'll see later on. It allows you to record quote-unquote voice pills just by tapping on that key. There's also a mute switch as well that will disable any audio if you're in a meeting, for example. Now perhaps the most interesting thing about this phone design though is again that display, not necessarily because it is symmetrical and super slim in terms of bezels, but because it is actually slightly curved on the edges, which is really weird because the frame of the phone is actually boxy, so there is kind of an indescribable feeling of holding a really boxy device. and yet having a curvature very faint on the screen there, which almost looks like it's lifting above and kind of jelly-like in its appearance. Definitely is a beautiful overall design, and because it is so subtle with, again, flattened edges, it means that as you're holding the phone, it doesn't become too problematic. There's not really any accidental triggers, unlike a lot of other more dramatic curved screens that we have seen in the past. And up top here, by the way, we do have a hole punch for the 20 megapixel selfie lens. Now, if we take a closer look at Smartisan OS, it looks utterly unfamiliar compared to stock Android, but this has to be one of, if not my favorite, launcher on top of Android. I say that because everything is so thoughtfully done, and it kind of goes back to, again, the early days of Apple's design language. Even applications that you install yourself from the Play Store end up with an icon pack that looks completely different from other phones that I've seen, such as this YouTube logo that is so retro looking that it just is awesome to see, as well as this Webtoon logo. I really don't know how they're doing this, because typical skins are only surface deep. They can only really change the way that some of their default own utility apps look, but once you install other ones, it kind of breaks the illusion or the consistency in those cases. But that doesn't seem to be true on Smartisan OS. Even on third-party apps, they're still consistent with the overall design language, almost like the phone is generating its own image as the thumbnail to use on the app shortcut. Very interesting. Otherwise, the applications inside also are just beautiful in their kind of vintage simplicity. Here is the calculator app, for example, and kind of takes you back. Even the sounds are just so satisfying as you're clicking on it. Haptic vibration engine, the small details as you're interacting with the UI are also done in a very tight and precise way. We also have access to, again, the clock app here, where you can interact with elements, including the timer, just by tapping on the keys here to start, as well as stop on the timer, like a real stopwatch, as well as their notes or memo app that also simulates the texture of wood, as you can tell there. It's almost like using a completely different operating system compared to what is stock, and that's what I love to see. As a mobile enthusiast, I always want to try something new, something different, and this is one of those rare instances where it's not only trying to be new for new's sake, but the entire experience still feels cohesive and elegant at the same time. Other methods of interaction, including the drag down notification tray, also look quite different. You can pull down with 2 fingers to access additional shortcuts for services like connectivity, as well as even a fake call mode. So if you trigger this after a few seconds, you'll get an incoming call, as you can tell there, from someone that you can set. And if you answer the call, it will actually speak to you. It's going to be more of a pre-recorded message than anything super intelligent, but still is kind of a clever way to get out of an awkward situation, perhaps. You can change the name as well as the voice even of the person on the other side. You can also swipe down from the edge of the phone to bring up this one-step interface. You can make the phone a little easier to hold in your hand, since again it's a pretty large phone in the R2's case, and more importantly, you're able to now multitask between 3 applications at once, including a universal clipping tool where you can instantly capture a snippet of any web page, any social media app that you're in, and save it as a text or an image. And this mini desktop mode is how I would like to call it, can be accessed on both corners of the phone, the left or the right, depending on if you're left or right-handed. And now moving into the kind of voice recorder button mode, if we tap on this, I can now begin to talk, and it will record a pill-like conversation here in blue. And when I release, it will stop that and try to convert what I'm saying into text, as you can tell, using voice-to-text transcription, which is actually pretty decent. It supports both English as well as Chinese, and from here, you can either search the web for that particular sentence, as well as the ability to treat it just as a kind of memo or a note, where you can complete different tasks and then check them off virtually on the side of the phone. You can always access that recording as well as that note whenever you click on the side key, helping you be more productive. You can even change the color of the note depending on the task, as well as rearrange the order of your notes or memos as you are completing them during your day. Yet another clever software feature is called Big Bang. You can press on any chunk of words or sentence to bring up a view like this, and from here you can see every single word is separately parsed. As you're maybe composing an email and trying to add a quote in there, you can even delete certain words really easily from here as well. So it's a quick way to, again, have a more advanced clipboarding function available whenever words can be accessed. And perhaps best of all, during all of these use cases, the phone remains really cool in operation and super silky, fast, and smooth. Really, there's so many of those small features and touches that it's impossible to go through all of them in a concise review, but gives you an idea in that sampling that we looked at there earlier. I will also mention that the phone does feel incredibly nice to use with the very subtle curved edges, especially as you're using the gesture mode for navigation. Swiping on the side there to go back by one page really does make good use of the 2.5D glass here on the side of the phone. Otherwise, taking a closer look at the camera performance next, I'll just jump into here, and this is one aspect where admittedly I would say Smartisan is not really a market leader, and that's kind of expected for a smaller R&D team to begin with. They don't have quite as much resources in computational photography as say Google does on their Pixel phones. However, it still is a very competent shooter, especially when coupled with very good sensors that they've picked on here. You get generally pleasing results, but a closer look here at the UI, we have on the bottom the ability to quickly jump back and forth between different focal lengths, including standard, as well as more of that ultra wide, the macro lens, as well as the 3x telephoto zoom lens can all be easily adjusted back and forth, or you can also do this by pinching in and out. A very thoughtful software solution here is they have a lock mode where if you are, for example, pointing the camera downwards, it can still remember that you want to save the images as either a portrait or horizontal. In some cases, on other phones, it might be a little bit tricky where after you capture a shot, you realize that it's been saved in the wrong direction, but on Smartisan OS, it's smart enough that you can lock the orientation on the side there. A night mode will increase the exposure time to capture more details in low light conditions, and under more you can find the typicals including a QR code scanner, a pro mode, as well as a portrait mode. This allows you to adjust properties like ISO and white balance yourself, and then video can also be captured at 4K 60 FPS without too many issues either. I would say again the larger sensor size as well as some of the processing is doing a fair job. It is still retaining plenty of colors here in the sky as well as fine details, even though we're in a darker again hallway here as the lights start getting dimmer. Not bad at all, especially again you can have plenty of detail to zoom into even if colors are a little bit on the oversaturated side. And here's just a few more examples. As long as you have some moderate lighting around, I would say it still is a very good performer. You can also of course use the macro lens to get even closer to your objects, but some natural bokeh can already be observed due to the large sensor size. You get a slightly natural falling off of details the further out you go, but kind of sharper towards the top end of your photos. Now, of course, this being made by a parent company that produces a social media app, arguably they could have done more R&D on the video recording capabilities, which on here it's not bad, but it's nothing revolutionary. It's a general trend that on Android smartphones, they're still a step behind iPhones when it comes to stability of video footage. Regardless, taking a closer look now at some of the performance in media consumption, we can see that even the sliders here are completely different from stock Android. But overall takeaway being that it is a beautiful sounding speaker, really full, excellent stereo separation that feels quite well balanced on the earpiece and the bottoms here. It doesn't distort at higher volume levels and even has a bit of punch and bass to it surprisingly. So this is going to be great for watching movies, TV shows, and the like, which is also making use of this beautiful display. Overall loading times are also pretty much instantaneous with excellent, again, antenna reception with the 865 chip. Dual band Wi-Fi was getting almost consistently full bars. Here's also a quick demo of what it's like to browse the web on this phone, and as aforementioned, the 865 is keeping up really well. Super fast, contrast-rich, and sharp display makes it a joy to use for reading back articles. No thermal throttling issues here at all, and especially with the maximum RAM configuration, you can open up literally dozens of tabs and they won't really reflow as you're jumping back and forth between them. It still is a very well optimized system, I have to say. And it should come as no surprise that with the Snapdragon 865, this is still going to be a really smooth performer when it comes to pretty much any title that you download from the store, whether it's going to be heavier games like PUBG, Asphalt series, or even more casual titles like Stack, as you can tell here, will run flawlessly. Super smooth, no thermal throttling issues to speak of here, and generally remains a consistent performer, which is great. And now connecting the phone to a monitor or a laptop, it transforms into the aforementioned desktop mode called TNT, which can also be done wirelessly as well. So if you have a wireless monitor, The UI continues to be elegant and now provides split-screen views for better multitasking with floating windows. That really reminds me of macOS as well as Chrome OS. We have even resizable options here on the very top of the device, and on the very bottom you can swipe over to access additional controls, and even access all of your idea pills, aka voice notes, simultaneously too. Other shortcuts include a universal search here on the side that you can type in for searching the web, as well as applications you have available, and access a full list of all your applications on your phone here as well, just by clicking down below. And then obviously, like other desktop modes, whenever you access the browser, it will now take us to the full desktop class version of that site instead. So as you can tell here, it's going to be more comfortable on a larger display like this. And I can, again, go into a page like The Verge and see how that loads. You can tell it still is a really smooth and fast experience thanks to the Snapdragon 865 and the excellent software optimization going on here. This desktop mode also has a custom screenshot function that you can use to annotate and draw over, say if you're trying to sign a document or snip just a single part of the word. You can even long hold to access additional contextual menus, also simulating what a right click will do on a mouse or trackpad. So it is a very well fleshed out desktop mode. So that's just a closer look at the Smartisan R2. I have no problem calling this one of the best, most distinctive Android smartphones on the market that you probably won't and shouldn't buy, since ByteDance as well as support for this device is really a huge question mark going forward. But undeniably, all the attention to detail, the smart, unique, small, subtle touches is what really sets it apart. That being said, if you are a mobile phone enthusiast, you're a collector, or you just want to try something really different, at this point in time, in 2023, this is still extremely powerful and capable smartphone. So you can check out more details if interested and learn more about this unique brand, Smartisan, and links down below. But for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the R2 Revisited.